Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. God. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Na Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Purajikacharya Ashtottara to Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Purajikacharya Ashtottara to Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Now I think we are on text 23.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Oh, very good, very good. Is that a new tablet you got or something?
Let me do this. Let me try this.
Oh, fantastic. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
On this 14th day of November 2022 in San Diego, reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme, text 23, near the bottom of page 366. Yatra kale tu anavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha prayata yanti tam kalam vakshyami bhatarshabha yatra kale tvanavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha priyata yanti tam kalam vakshyami bhatarshabha yatra kale tvanavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha priyata yanti tam kalam vakshyami bhatarshabha yatra kale tvanavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha priyata yanti tam kalam vakshyami bhatarshabha. Dharmaraj. Yatra kale tvanavrittim avrittim chaiva yoginaha tam kalam vakshyami bhatarshabha.
Yatra kale tav anavrittim
Yatra kale tvanavrittim
avrittim chaiva yoginaha
avrittim chaiva yoginaha
prayatayanti tam kalam
priyata yanti tam kalam
vakshayami bharatarsabha
vakshyami bhatarshabha.
Yatra kale te anavrittim
Yatra kale tvanavrittim
avrittim chaiva yogina
avrittim chaiva yoginaha
prayata yanti tam kalam
priyata yanti tam kalam
vakshyami bharatshabha.
vakshyami bhatarshabha. Anyone else?
Yatra kale tvanavrittim
Yatra kale tvanavrittim
avrittim chaiva yoginaha
avrittim chaiva yoginaha
prayata yanti tam kalam
priyata yanti tam kalam
vakshyami bharatarshava.
vakshyami bhatarshabha. Yatra, at which, kale, time, to, and, anavrittim, no return, avrittim, return, cha, also, eva, certainly, yoginaha, different kinds of mystics, priyataha, having departed, yanti, attain, tam, that, kalam, time, vakshyami, I shall describe, bharata rishabha, or best of the Bharatas. Translation. Krishna says to Arjuna, O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which, passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. Purport. The unalloyed devotees of the Supreme Lord, who are totally surrendered souls, do not care when they leave their bodies or by what method. They leave everything in Krishna's hands and so easily and happily return to Godhead. But those who are not unalloyed devotees and who depend instead on such methods of spiritual realization as karma-yoga, jñāna-yoga, and haṭha-yoga must leave the body at a suitable time in order to be sure of whether or not they will return to the world of birth and death. If the yogi is perfect, he can select the time and situation for leaving this material world. But if he is not so expert, his success depends on his accidentally passing away at a certain suitable time. The suitable times at which one passes away and does not come back are explained by the Lord in the next verse. According to Acharya Baladev Vidyabhushan, the Sanskrit word kala used herein refers to the presiding deity of time. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Salakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. So this part of the Bhagavad Gita, part of the 8th chapter, I always wondered about it, because after all this effort to he talks about in the 6th chapter, because the 6th chapter and the 8th chapter, there are certain parts that are very parallel. He's been talking about meditation, about putting the tension between the eyebrows at a certain point. And so it's so difficult that Arjuna didn't even want to take it up. He said, I can't do it. Chanchalami mana Krishna pramati balavadurham. The mind is too powerful. It's like a hurricane. I can't control it. And finally, at the end of the chapter, when Krishna said, well, yes, it's difficult, but with practice you can, progress. And then Arjuna says, yeah, but if I don't succeed, I've given up my material side, and I go to the Himalayas and try this, and I lose that, so I'm like a ribbon clad. I'm not. So Arjuna said, okay. Krishna said, don't worry. Yoginam abhisarvesham magatina antaratmana. The greatest yogis are those who always with great faith worship me and think of me always within their heart. And that's Arjuna. He's a great devotee already. He's always Krishna. And then we're off in the 7th chapter, and it's all about developing attraction for Krishna in the mind, understanding the material energy, surrendering to him, daiviyesha gunamayi. And then the 8th chapter begins with some kind of technical explanations. What is Adibhutam, what is Adidaiva, and so forth. But then it gets to the key point, is that remembering Krishna. If you remember Krishna at the end of life, there's these 3 verses, you remember 5, 6, 7. Andakali tamameva smaran mukva kalevanam yakpriyati samadbhavam yasinatrita sankhya. One who at the end of his life can remember me, and then comes to me and doesn't come back to this world. And whatever is, young bhavi smarang bhavam, whatever is the dominant thought when you leave the body, that will determine your next life. And Prabhupada makes it very clear, which is obvious, that during your lifetime you're developing various thoughts and dominant modes of nature, which will determine what's that dominant thought at the end of your life. So therefore, we have to practice in order to remember Krishna. And so then the last, text 7, he says, therefore always think of me and fight. And we can fill in the blanks there. Always think of me and do our duties, especially if we're favorable, and those duties can help us remember Krishna. And then he describes some very important verses, and Mama Peta Puna Janma, the one who comes to me, doesn't come back again to this world, which is full of miseries. But now, at the end of the chapter, he's giving us these times which seem to be, as Prabhupada says in the purport, well, if you leave your body at that time, you don't come back. Seems to be like a roulette wheel, But the very last verse of the chapter says, but the devotees don't worry about that. And that's the key point for us, is that we really don't have to be concerned about the technicalities of when and where you leave the body. If you've developed this Krishna consciousness, you're always remembering Krishna. Here we are in the West, and so many devotees I've seen leave their bodies in hospitals, and but they're surrounded by devotees who were chanting Hare Krishna. So many times we came. That's really the key, whether you can remember on your own Hare Krishna, because you may die at any time, or you're fortunate at the end of life, you're incapacitated, but the devotees have come to see you off and help you remember Krishna by chanting his holy name and like that. So that will become clear here, but there's this little technical thing about all these different times, and that they're auspicious or inauspicious. So that's what we're going to be reading now. Assuming there are no questions, we'll go on. Oh yes, go ahead.
Well, I never asked questions. So if somebody is listening to a Hare Krishna in their car and they have an accident, what would happen?
Very auspicious?
Yes.
Well, it depends on who's on the CD.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully. There's a verse, Vaishnava mukhargyanam putam harikatamitam sabhananaiva kartavyam sarpochistam yatapayaha. What this says is that one should never hear Krishna Katha, including Kirtan, from non-Vaishnavas. Because although it sounds like the same sound, it's just like milk, which can taste exactly, the same, but it could be a serpent, a cobra may have drunk out of that pot and put some poison in there. So in other words, it sounds the same, but it's not doing you any good. And that became especially prominent, because there's some people who become very expert at chanting Hare Krishna melodically, but they're not devotees. And they make CDs and so forth, but they're more or less just doing it for money. So it's important to, but there's so many beautiful kirtans that have been recorded by, Gauravani and company and so many. I have one CD in my car. That's all I play in the car, I put it in. It's a festival in New Vrindavan when many devotees came and they sang different kirtans. They're very beautiful, So, yes. Just like we're reading in the morning, and you're getting these morning classes, but we're reading about this famous devotee named Jamil, who was a very pious Brahmin in his youth, but he wasn't a full-on devotee. He was worshippers, the Vedas and everything. But he knew about Narayan and the Supreme Personality, but he wasn't a full-on Vaishnav, as it were. And so he was out collecting firewood for, I think it was for his father or his guru, to perform sacrifice, which is a standard menial service you perform. And suddenly he comes upon some Shudra couple, or half-dressed, embracing each other, intoxicated, and he can't control his senses. He was trained, he had Brahminical qualities, but like what would a devotee do? Well, here in the West, practically encounter that thing. You walk and there's a billboard somewhere, or here we are on the beach in the summertime, You're going to be confronted with these things. You chant Hare Krishna, you look away, you pray, you chant some verse, Yasyatma buddhi kunapeti dhatuke, the verse? Where Krishna says, one who thinks that this bag of mucus, bile, and air is himself is no better than a donkey. He doesn't understand. In other words, you can see what's to be attracted. Ultimately, it's just a bag of blood and bones. So in other words, there's a million ways in which a devotee deals with this, because especially confronted with it all the time. But he didn't have that training. He didn't have the association. Again, he was all alone. And so he fell down his whole life. He's married the prostitute. He left his chaste young wife. He ignored his old parents who needed him for support. He was very sinful. In other words, he committed all kinds of things. Welcome, Michael. Nice to see you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. We are on page 367. So anyway, what happened? So I don't know if you know the story. You know the story. Maybe it's new to Michael. Jamil, 6th canto. So at the end of his life comes. He's 80 some odd years old. He has 10 children, and the youngest is like 3 or 4 years old. In other words, he's having sex into his 80s. 367. And so he's dying. His boy is playing in the room, And he was very fond of that boy, and he would call upon him, when he ate something, and said, his name was Narayan. He named him Narayan. He had 10 children. Doesn't say what his other children were named. And so he's always calling him, and then at the final moment, he sees the Yamadutas. Have you heard about the Yamadutas? The Yamadutas, Duta means messenger or aid, a servant. So Yamaraj, he's the universal judge. He's called Dharmaraj. He knows all the laws, all the sins you could commit, and what the appropriate punishments are. And those who are very sinful, they're brought before Yamaraj for judgment. And then, the end of the 5th chapter, there's a whole list. There's 26, I think. I worked on this chapter back in 1975. And we had a marathon. We were working at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And I swear there was one illustration. Nobody wanted to have it in their room. It was an illustration that they made for the book of somebody suffering in hell. No one wants to hang that up in their room, so they hung it up in my room. So I'm looking there, and then I'm reading it in the book. So anyway, I remember reading that. I was like one of the first ones to read it because I'm working editing, Oh my God. So there are many hells where you suffer in your subtle body, so you don't die. You know, I forget all the punishment. Each punishment says, if you do this, then you get that. The one I especially remember, if you boil animals alive, you know, and then eat them, I said, oh, that sounds like lobster. Yeah, lobster. Because when I was a kid, I never had lobster, but I would see them in the windows of the restaurants, because I was right near Manhattan. We used to go into the city, you know. And there in the windows, oh, this is very attractive. There's a live lobster enjoying himself in a little fish tank. Little did he know that he's going to be dropped in to a pot and boiled alive. So if you do that, then guess what the punishment is? You get boiled alive. But you don't die. You know, millions of years you're boiling alive. Anyway. So there's all of these hells described. And then the next chapter, which is the first chapter of the 6th canto, Maharaj Pariksit, who's listening to this, you know the whole scene. He had 7 days to live. He was cursed. And instead of counteracting the curse, or begging Krishna to please counteract the curse, he accepted the curse. And so he had noticed 7 days what to do. What would we do with seven days, you know? Well, we can try to chant Hare Krishna and listen to Bhagavatam. But that's what he did. He just sat down by the river and he was fasting until death, you know, whichever came first. He lasted for 7 days, and he was finally bitten by the snake bird. And he heard the Bhagavatam from the most qualified speaker, Shukadeva Goswami, who had heard it from his father, Vyasadeva. Shukadeva was kind of a Brahmavadi, means that he wasn't a Mayavadi, but he preferred absorption in Brahman. He was, you know. But when he heard the Bhagavatam from his father, he became a bhakta. He got attracted to Krishna. Just like the 4 Kumaras, same thing happened with them. So he came, and everyone respected him. He you know, as soon as he was born, he took sannyas. You know, he was like, what, 14, 12, something. He stayed in the womb for a long time, and years, and he didn't want to get entangled. But when he came out, you know, Krishna had to preach to him in the womb. He came from Dwarka to preach, come out, you won't get entangled, don't worry about it. So he came out, took sannyas, walked off naked. And his father's running after him because he wanted to teach him the Bhagavatam. You know? But he was absorbed, so he goes off into the forest. So it's not mentioned in the Bhagavatam, but his father, Vyasadeva, would send out various of his students, his disciples, to chant nectar verses in the forest to try to attract the mind of Shukadeva. And one of them was the one you've heard me chant this, but it's ever fresh. Barhapidam natavadavapu karneo karnikaram bimran vasa kanakakapisham vaijayanting chamalam randran venor adadasudeya purdiyan gopavrindar vrindaranyam sopadadamanam pravishad gita kirti. So this describes Krishna entering into the forest with lovely peacock plume upon his head and fragrant flower placed upon each ear. He enters Braja's woods with graceful tread, a handsome dancing actor without peer. His golden yellow raiment brightly glows, his splendid garland reaches to his knees, and from his luscious lips the nectar flows and fills his flute with charming melodies. As Krishna thus begins his blissful day with cowherd friends who sing his glory sweet, he beautifies Vrindavan's forest way with fine impressions of his lotus feet. So he's hearing this and other wonderful verses, and he gets attracted. So he comes down from the forest, hears the Bhagavatam from his father, 18,000 verses, he memorizes them as he hears them. They're called Shrutidhar. And he was then, you know, the foremost devotee, you know, after being the foremost Brahmavadi. So he's the one who speaks the Bhagavatam to Vyasadeva, to Pariksit. And I don't know how many days it was into it, but its 6th canto was about halfway through. But actually the 10th canto is so long, so it's more than halfway. And but he's just hearing it, and he felt so compassionate to all these poor souls who are suffering. So this first question: how can they be relieved of their suffering? How can they be relieved? So Shukadeva was testing him. So first he gave him they have to atone for their sins, just like in the Christian religion. You have to atone for if you committed sin. You go and confess and maybe do some charity. I don't know what you do. So he described various atonement processes in the Vedas that are described in the different parts of the Vedas, not in the Bhagavatam so much. And after Pritchard heard them, he said, well, that's okay, but the problem is, it's like an elephant's bathing. An elephant goes into a river and bathes very nicely, gets rid of all the dust and dirt and everything. It comes out, and then in order to ward off all the insects and everything, this is what I understand, he puts a whole bunch of dust on his back, so he's dirty again. So similarly, someone who is simply doing this materialistic atonement, you may negate the sins, that's good, but you don't negate the desire in the heart to perform the sinful activity again. It's right in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 2nd chapter, we had this verse, Vishayabhanivartante nidahara siddhehinak rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtanavartate. That the Vishaya is a word that means the objects of the senses that give you pleasure, sense gratification. And I like to point out the similarity between the word Vishaya and Visha. Visha means poison. Vishaya means the object of the senses for sense gratification. Right in the language it's preaching to you. So what this verse says is that one can, by force, restrain himself from the object of the senses. People go on a diet, right? Or they say, no more alcohol. It's ruining my life. I don't, But the desire is still there. And if they get the wrong association, they walk by a bar, or they meet one of their old buddies that they used to get drunk with, then the temptation is very much that the mind, says, what's the matter? We'll have just 1 or 2 drinks, it's cool, I can control it. It's called falling off the wagon, right? So you can't control it because the desire is still deep in your heart that you planted there through many days. So that's the problem with your force of will. Your intelligence may be there. What is it? The soul is, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? But param drishtanavartate. If you see, you directly experience param, which in this case means the supreme, which means Krishna. In other words, if you become Krishna conscious, even the desire goes. And the process of Krishna consciousness is better than atonement. It eradicates all the sins. And what's so powerful, chanting one name, and this is what the Ajamil story is all about. So Parikka said, no, it's like the elephant bathing, it won't do. Give me some more. So he went on, and finally he tells the story of Ajamil, who was so sinful all his life, but he was calling the name Narayan, especially at the end of life there, when he was going to get ripped out of his body by these horrific, terrifying Yamadutas, whose job it is to haul you away, screaming, yelling to Yamaraj. And so as soon as he said Narayan, he called his little boy, who's off in the corner playing, Narayan, one time. And immediately the Vishnu Dutas came. It means the messengers of Vishnu. And they stopped the Yamadutas. No, you can't take him, he's completely pure. And so there's a whole little debate, because the Yamadutas don't know about the power of the holy name. So they tell the story of Ajamil's life, and they say this is the law, he committed all these different sins, and now it's time for punishment. And so then the Vishnu Dutas, in the chapter we're reading now, which is chapter 2, they say, no, you don't know the principles of religion. By chanting this name, not only once, but when he was calling before, his favorite son. He was more than atonement. He was eradicating, any hint of the sinful reaction. So he's not eligible to be punished. And the Yamadutas are a little confused because they were never taught that by Yamaraj. And so they go back there, and Yamaraj himself gives them some good lessons, some very important lessons. So the point is that these technicalities that we're going to be reading now in the next couple of verses about what time to leave and what not time to leave, devotees don't have to worry about that, as Prabhupada explains in this purport. What's most important is the purity that you've achieved of your heart, your devotion to Krishna, and your ability to remember Krishna at the time of death. That's the final exam. Despite all the pain and the fear and the anxiety, whatever it may be, Krishna, 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 Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. If you're able to chant, that's what it all comes down to, Or if you're able to hear, because devotees are around you. That's the importance of association. So let's go forward here. We'll maybe finish this chapter. Oh, please go ahead. We have Mark up there, right there.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
So, Prabhu, Krishna, Narayan, and Ram, all have the same intensity, like the same potency, purification, or if someone, like my grandma, she was really connected with Ram, so she would write Ram, 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 Ram. Some people like Krishna, some people keep saying Shri Hari, Narayan. So what is, you think?
When it comes to eradication of sins, they're all the same. But when it comes to the variety and intensity of different rasas, then Krishna is supreme. Krishna is the very first words of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Akala Rasamrita Murti. Akala Rasamrita Murti means that he is the personification of all the different rasas. You can't enjoy friendship ras with Narayan. Narayan has the four arms with the club, disc, the lotus, and the, I forget one. What's one? Club, disc, lotus, and conch. And he's God. So the proper mood, which is fine, is dasya ras, surrender. There's Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even though you look pretty much like him, because you also have four arms in Vaikuntha, But there's no frolicking in the forest. There's no being tied up, where he's hiding all his glory so he can enjoy and give an opportunity for Mother Yashoda to enjoy maternal ras with him. So, but in terms of liberation, it's fine. You can go to Vaikuntha, be completely liberated. You'll have association of Krishna. There's the different Salokya, Sarshti, Samipya, Sarupya. All those four opulences you can enjoy. It means it's the same residence as the Lord, same form as the Lord, association with the Lord, the same opulences. But for devotees following the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that's not what we should aim for. We aim for discovering our eternal, intimate rasa with Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. And you may say, well, how do you know? Maybe you really belong in Vaikuntha. Well, if you did belong in Vaikuntha, you'd probably be in another movement. The fact that somehow we've been arranged to come to this, indicates that we belong, as Lord Chaitanya's followers. So that's the difference. It's rasa, not, the tattva. All right, moving on. And let's see, text 24, right? Agni Jyotir Ahak Shukla Shanmasa Uttarayanam Tatra Priyata Gachanti Brahma Brahma Vidorjanaha. Those who know the Supreme Brahman attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery god, in the light, at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. Purport: when fire, light, day, and the fortnight of the moon are mentioned, it is to be understood that over all of them there are various presiding deities who make arrangements for the passage of the soul. At the time of death, the mind carries one on the path to a new life. If one leaves the body at the time designated above, either accidentally or by arrangement, it is possible for him to attain the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. Mystics who are advanced in yoga practice can arrange the time and place to leave the body. Others have no control. If by accident they leave at an auspicious moment, then they will not return to the cycle of birth and death. But otherwise, there is every possibility that they will have to return. However, for the pure devotee in Krishna consciousness, there is no fear of returning, whether he leaves the body at an auspicious or inauspicious moment, by accident or arrangement. So this indicates it's the Brahma Vidas, those who know the absolute truth, in the impersonal form, more or less, who are determined of returning or not returning. But in the purport, Prabhupada says, well, it's others have no control. They're not mystics. So I'm not sure how this is supposed to work, because there's quite a number of times here that that are eligible. It's not like a very specific time. It's different months. So not much is explained by that in our commentators. But the basic idea is that, as we'll read in a few verses, text 27, we don't have to worry about it. Next verse. Dumo ratris tata Krishna Shanmasa Dakshinayanam Tatra Chandrama Sanjyotir Yogi Prapya Nivartate. The mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, reaches the moon planet, but again comes back. Purport. In the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Kapila Muni mentions that those who are expert in fruitive activities and sacrificial methods on earth attain to the moon at death. These elevated souls live on the moon for about 10,000 years, by demigod calculations, and enjoy life by drinking soma ras. They eventually return to earth. This means that on the moon there are higher classes of living beings, though they may not be perceived by the gross senses. And please don't ask me what the time of the smoke is. I have no idea. And it doesn't explain it. Shukla Krishne Gati Hete
Shukla Krishna Gati Hete
Jagatak Shasvate Mate
Jagata Sasvate Mate
Ekaya Yatyana Vrittim
Ekayaya Anavrittim
Anyaya Vartate Punaha.
Anyaya Vartate Punaha.
According to Vedic opinion, there are two ways of passing from this world, one in light and one in darkness. When one passes in light, he does not come back, but when one passes in darkness, he returns. Purport. The same description by departure and return is quoted by Acharya Baladev Vidyabhushan from the Chandogya Upanishad 5.10.3-5. Those who are fruitive laborers and philosophical speculators from time immemorial are constantly going and coming. Actually, they do not attain ultimate salvation, for they do not surrender to Krishna. 27. Naite Sriti Partha-janan Yogi Muhyati Kaschana Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu Yoga Yukto Bhavarjuna. Although the devotees know these two paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. Purport. Krishna is here advising Arjuna that he should not be disturbed by the different paths and the soul can take when leaving the material world. A devotee of the Supreme Lord should not worry whether he will depart by arrangement or by accident. The devotee should be firmly established in Krishna consciousness and chant Hare Krishna. He should know that concern over either of these two paths is troublesome. The best way to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness is to be always dovetailed in his service, and this will make one's path to the spiritual kingdom safe, certain, and direct. The word yoga yukta is especially significant in this verse. One who is firm in yoga is constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness in all his activities. Sri Rupa Goswami advises anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjataha. One should be unattached in material affairs and do everything in Krishna consciousness. By this system, which is called yukta vairagya, one attains perfection. Therefore, the devotee is not disturbed by these descriptions because he knows that his passage to the supreme abode is guaranteed by devotional service. So translation, we read the word bewildered, which is muhyati, and in the purport we read the word that the devotee is not disturbed. And I think that one takes both of those words. He's not concerned. You're not worried about it. That's why I say this passage is kind of a little interlude, where Krishna is emphasizing how auspicious it is to follow Krishna consciousness, and then you come to the point of constant remembrance. When you have constant remembrance, then what's the anxiety? You can get hit by a car, something, an alien can fall on you. Anything can happen. You have a heart attack, but you're ready to go. You're ready at every moment. And that can really bring about a great sense of peace and confidence. Is that I'm not the body. The body is just a vehicle. Whether it stops functioning in the next 10 minutes or the next 10 years, my position is the same if I work on always remembering Krishna and doing everything for Krishna. It's not easy to come to that platform. We're so conditioned, but it is possible. And the wonderful thing about it is you never lose anything. If you don't make it this life, everything you've accomplished in terms of remembrance and service, it stays with you in your next life. Whereas everything materially is taken away. So material, striving for material happiness, security, whatever it may be, name, fame, is a fool's errand. Because it's just like, children, probably compared to children, where they play at being a king, and king of the mountain or something, and then and you feel like I'm the king, follow my orders, But it's just a game. And after 10 minutes, the mothers drag the kids back, it's time for lunch. And it's all over. You're not a king anymore. So whatever you get materially in this life, it's all gone, because it's all attached to the body. But whatever you do spiritually is in your spiritual bank account. And it's you paid your dues, and you're on your way. You're on your way back to Godhead. So the obvious, the best investment, because we're all investing. I mean, we're not gambling, investing in the stock market, but we're investing our time, our energy, our attention, our faith in a certain line of action. We just had an election. Now, I didn't vote. I hope I'm not in the doghouse. I'm not voting, but because I don't have any faith. I don't have any faith in this that this is going to help anybody. And as soon as I invest, you're investing my vote in some person, then suppose they turn out, we have Democrats and Republicans. The Democrats, they're all very, forward-looking. They're for abortion. Now, so I'm going to vote for that Democrat, or am I going to vote for the MAGA Republican? No, thank you. No, thank you. I don't have faith in any of them. I'd rather vote for Krishna. That's a sure thing. All right, so the last verse of the chapter here sums it all up, and it brings us all back to what we've been hearing all throughout the book. Vedeshu yagyeshu tapaksu chaiva daneshu yat punya palam padishtam atyeti tat sarvamidam viditva yogi padang stanam upaiti chadhyam. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end he reaches the supreme eternal abode. Purport. This verse is the summation of the 7th and 8th chapters. Wow. Which particularly deal with Krishna consciousness and devotional service. One has to study the Vedas under the guidance of the spiritual master and undergo many austerities and penances while living under his care. A brahmachari has to live in the home of the spiritual master just like a servant, and he must beg alms from door to door and bring them to the spiritual master. He takes food only under the master's order, and if the master neglects to call the student for food that day, the student fasts. These are some of the Vedic principles for observing brahmacharya. After the student studies the Vedas under the master for some time, at least from age 5 to 20, he becomes a man of perfect character. Study of the Vedas is not meant for the recreation of armchair speculators, but for the formation of character. After this training, the brahmachari is allowed to enter into household life and marry. When he is a householder, he has to perform many sacrifices so that he may achieve further enlightenment. He must also give charity according to the country, time, and candidate, discriminating among charity in goodness, in passion, and in ignorance, as described in the Bhagavad Gita. Then, after retiring from household life, upon accepting the order of vanaprastha, he undergoes severe penances, living in forests, dressing with tree bark, not shaving, etc. By carrying out the orders of brahmacharya, householder life, vanaprastha, and finally sannyas, one becomes elevated to the perfectional stage of life. Some are then elevated to the heavenly kingdoms, and when they become even more advanced, they are liberated in the spiritual sky, either in the impersonal Brahmajyoti, or in the Vaikuntha planets, or Krishna Loka. This is the path outlined by Vedic literatures. The beauty of Krishna consciousness, however, is that by one stroke, by engaging in devotional service, one can surpass all the rituals of the different orders of life. The words idam viditva indicate that one should understand the instructions given by Sri Krishna in this chapter and the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. One should try to understand these chapters not by scholarship or mental speculation, but by hearing them in association with devotees. Chapters 7 through 12 are the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. The first 6 and the last 6 chapters are like coverings for the middle 6 chapters, which are especially protected by the Lord. If one is fortunate enough to understand the Bhagavad Gita, especially these middle 6 chapters, in the association of devotees, then his life at once becomes glorified beyond all penances, sacrifices, charities, speculations, etc. For one can achieve all the result of these activities simply by Krishna consciousness. Does anyone know how to turn off this heat? No. Okay. One who has little faith in the Bhagavad Gita should learn the Bhagavad Gita from a devotee, because in the beginning of the 4th chapter it is stated clearly that the Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees. No one else can perfectly understand the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, I have to explain. Oh, there's a bug there. Okay. Thank you, Sal. Sal is turning it off. Now, this word purpose, we should know that this is part of the what should I say? The special knowledge that comes from working on Prabhupada's books. That purpose, the word purpose, Prabhupada would sometimes use to mean not purpose, but purport. And I think that's what he means here. No one else can perfectly understand the meaning of the Bhagavad Gita or the purport of the Bhagavad Gita. Anyway, one should therefore learn the Bhagavad Gita from a devotee of Krishna, not from mental speculators. This is a sign of faith. When one searches for a devotee and fortunately gets a devotee's association, one actually begins to study and understand the Bhagavad Gita. By advancement in the association of the devotee, one is placed in devotional service, and this service dispels all one's misgivings about Krishna or God and Krishna's activities, form, pastimes, name, and other features. After these misgivings have been perfectly cleared away, one becomes fixed in one's study. Then one relishes the study of the Bhagavad Gita and attains the state of feeling always Krishna conscious. In the advanced stage, one falls completely in love with Krishna. This highest perfectional stage of life enables the devotee to be transferred to Krishna's abode in the spiritual sky, Goloka Vrindavan, where the devotee becomes eternally happy. You came at just the right time.
I know.
You missed all of the technicalities of when to leave the body and everything. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 8th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of attaining the Supreme. So, what have we learned in this 8th chapter? So let's have a quick review. So the 8th chapter begins with Krishna answering, with Arjuna asking questions of Krishna based on what Krishna said at the end of the 7th chapter. And, oh my Lord, what is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is material manifestation? What are the demigods? Please explain this to me. Who is the Lord of sacrifice? How does he live in the body, O Madhusudan? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? So Krishna answers systematically. Karma is that which produces a new body. That's one of the ones I remember here. Action pertaining to development of the material bodies of living is called karma, or fruitive activities. The indestructible transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Adibhauta, the best of body beings, the physical nature which is constantly changing, is called Adibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adidaiva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the Super Soul in the heart of every being, am called Adiyagya, the Lord of Sacrifice. And then comes these 3 verses which I regard as kind of the essence of the chapter, 5, 6, and 7. I mentioned them earlier. Antakali chamam eva, whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remember me alone, at once attends my nature, of this there's no doubt. It's kind of the essence of the whole thing. But then, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So the whole idea is that the mind is so mercurial, is going here and there and everything. So getting control of that mind and somehow fixing it on Krishna, that's the basic goal of Krishna consciousness. And Krishna gives us a great hint, text 7. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without a doubt. This is kind of repeated at the end of the 11th chapter, where Prabhupada says this verse at the end of the 11th chapter is the essence of the whole book. 55. Anyone who wants to approach the supreme of all personalities of Godhead on Krishna Loka in the planet of spiritual Sai and be intimately connected with his Lord must take this formula as stated by the Supreme himself. Therefore, this verse, 1155, is considered to be the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. What's the translation? My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation, he who works for me, who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me. So that's the same idea, repeated several times in the Bhagavad Gita. And then he talks about abhyasa yoga, practicing yoga in order to reach the stage of constantly remembering Krishna. Then he describes, suddenly he's in the third person now. He says he describes that Supreme Personality as if he wasn't it. That takes 9 and 10, and then it's very interesting because he seems to be going back to the 6th chapter and talking about meditation. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all the doors of the senses, and fixing the mind on the heart and the life air at the top of the head when it's established in yoga. We're back to Ashtanga yoga now. Situated in his yoga practice, vibrating the Om. He thinks of the Supreme Lord, he quits his body, goes to the spiritual planets. And then comes a verse that's very memorable because it kind of simplifies everything. For one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Prita, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So once you come to the point of always remembering Krishna, he's easy to attain. But coming to that state is not so easy to attain. And then one of the most memorable verses of the whole chapter, Mamu Pecha Punarjanma Dukali Mashashratam Naptavanti Mahatmana Sangsiddhim Padamangata. This phrase, Dukali Mashashratam, is often quoted alone just to describe, this is what this material world is. Dukaliya means an abode of pain and misery. Birth, old age, disease, and death, the threefold miseries. You know, it comes with the territory. So we don't want to be here. We want to be with Krishna, and one who attains to him never comes back. Naptavanti Mahatmana. Mamapeja Punar Janma, he doesn't take birth again in this world. So then he describes him now to yoga. He said even Brahma has to come down sometimes. He's not always a pure devotee and goes back. Even from his planet, they're coming and going. He goes into Brahma's lifetime. In the creation again and again. The memorable phrase, Bhutva praliyate. Again and again, destruction. You know, you build something up, no matter you be on the heavenly planets, you think, I got it made, you know, but again it's destroyed. Your position is never secure in the material world. Eventually the whole thing is destroyed. And he goes on, and then it comes to near the end here, what we just read, about all these times. But he sums it up at 28. The last chapter, you know, a person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifice, undergoing austerities, giving charity. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. And that's great, you know, introduction to the 9th chapter, which is kind of completely memorable. Every verse in it, you know, it's a key chapter. And so we'll begin that chapter tomorrow. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.